Welcome to our continuing conversations with Joe Visconti. Welcome, Joe.
Great to be here. Been waiting for this for 2 days.
Well, we aim for truth, but you're one of these guys who strikes truth right in the heart of the target, bullseye. So today we're going to talk about some things that you came up with, great topics, but also you just had an experience that, if you don't mind, would you share it with our subscribers, this experience you just had, because they may be having the same experience?
I did it. I don't get these all the time. They're very rare. But I had an experience and I called Doug. I think it was yesterday. I'm losing track of time. And it's nice to know things. And then if you have an experience to be able to try to interpret what just happened and also call someone like Doug to go, Doug, am I crazy or what just happened? I was driving down the road and like we all do, going doing some tasks, whatnot. And I just saw, it's hard to explain, and that's why Rudolf Steiner so many times says it's hard to put into words. There are no words for some of these things, but we can only attempt to. But I saw the world in front of me: the telephone poles, the trees, the lights, the sky. Nice sunny day. I I witnessed almost like cream or cappuccino steam. I saw a world, the world, rising up out of the world, but ever so slowly as a vision. Um, I don't take drugs and I don't drink, but it was just amazing. There was we talked about it what is, and Doug is going to talk a little more about this, but the disenchantment of matter in a secondary world that has already begun rising for thousands of years, slowly, ever so slowly. It's always present. And not always do we get to see this or have a vision or experience. I won't call it a vision, it was experience while we're awake, while we're participating in reality. And then go on for hours on just how it happened and what I saw, but it gave me the understanding that what I believe and what I know, what I believe and what I know, I understood. And it's just there's another world, a world within behind the world. I am Jesus Christ. I'm in the world, but not of the world. There is an ascension of the planet of. I'll let Doug translate it. I'm too mumbo jumbo with what occurred to me because it happened to me.
What's always important is, how did you feel afterwards?
I felt the conviction that everything that I know, and this is not the only experience, but everything that I know, and I've studied for 50 years with Rudolf Steiner, and I've had many different things, and they come in different grades and times. This one was just an in your face look. It wasn't a vision. It was, I saw a second side, I saw a second earth within the earth that I'm driving in, and just appear, and almost like double exposure in the old days when we had photographs. We see a double exposure. It was that kind of thing, but it was living and it was right there. I had to do everything I could to use my left brain and bring myself back into the earth world. So the conviction I had was, my God, I'm living so much in the material world. And we're all materialists, whether we like to believe it or not, struggling and fighting to separate out. And then we sometimes are given that ability to see where we are. But just conviction, and there's no in the conviction for me. There was no. I only called Doug to talk to him about it, but there was no. With this comes such a peace that you're not trying to convince anyone or the world. You don't need to. It's just like you look out and the sun comes up. There's nobody to call. Look, the ball in the sky. Do you see it? There's the sun coming up. There was no reason or ambition or uh, emotional drive to necessarily share it or use it or try to convince others. It was really and I'm sure people have had many types of these types of experiences. But I had it in the most unusual time, just driving to my storage facility in the back roads of my town.
Hmm. Well, you see, that's confirmation of your own ascension. It sounds like, first off, that it would have been better had you not been driving. It probably would have continued for a lot longer, right? Because
Yes.
you got to take in concern that,
I curtailed it. I curtailed it because I had to snap back into the material world and drive.
now that is a very, very common experience for people who are separating their physical body from their etheric body. Because our etheric bodies are this unseen body that gives us our entire life. And essentially, a person like yourself who's already worked, you have a strong ego, you know who you are, you know where you came from, where you're at, where you're going. It's called a cosmology. And of course, you're working on your astral body and taming your desires and focusing them. And basically, everything you've ever done now comes to fruition at our age, of course. And if you can look through the astral body and not be not encounter a dragon or the three devils or all these doppelgangers and stuff. Obviously, you've worked through that, so you're beginning to see the separation. Yes, you see the unseen world, and this is so very common. I experienced this my entire life since I was a child. I never understood why people weren't looking up at the hosts of angels walking by. I could never understand it. I was like 12 years old, and I finally said, "Well, maybe they don't see it." But yes, the way that it generally works is just as Rudolf Steiner says, your aura extends out beyond your body. That's the aura that we'd call, there's four different types of auras, but that would be the etheric one. And it goes beyond your body and it looks somewhat luminous. You can see through it. It's living. It's like effulgent fluid light. It seems to have a wisdom of its own and it is rising up off the earth. We've had the first half of the development of the earth was all based upon entropy and death and gravity. Now, since the mystery of Golgotha, as you said, 2,000 years, you nailed it on the head. 2,000 years ago, we started separating out, and the etheric body of the earth started rising up, and that's where Christ lives, in that realm that you
Right.
started to see the
Yeah. And
separation.
I've seen the etheric body. I was trained to be able to see that very young age. As a teenager, my mother was into Rudolf Steiner forever, and so I could naturally see it, especially at the beach. You're able to see people walk, and if they just stop and they bend down at the ocean, at the shore, it's very visible. But I see it. I've seen that. This was different because it was so large. I mean, there was the place I was in town. There was really no trees, so you could see from horizon to horizon. So I saw this. Whoa, whole thing, and and again, how we can't convince our work is not to convince. I've recognized that too. There's absolutely no way to try to convince. If you wanted to, it really belongs to the perceiver and the person experiencing it. And maybe that's why there's so many people that are probably into Rudolf Steiner and many other walks in the occult positively that kind of hang out themselves, and there's no need to really want to share, or get out there and put it out.
Yes. Well, someone had called me the other day. We chatted after we text, and this person is having an experience. They started reading Tyler's book, The Gospel of Sophia, and they started having immediate, direct experiences that they'd never had before in their whole life. And this guy's a minister in a church, and so he's saying, "Well, I'm seeing these luminous things glowing around me." And I said, "And what else?" And he says, "And there's this swirling going on above my head, and it's just getting a little bit carried away, but it's swirling, swirling, swirling." And another person I know who's very advanced, she has this happening, and it's almost like a white tornado on top of your head. So that can scare people. So once you get beyond the astral, and that is a task that takes a long time for most people, but you've been working on this for since you were a child. So
Yeah, I've had many, many experiences. Why I called you on this one was really because the work I've been doing with you and John publicly, I have moved in the last 2 months since I've been working with you all, just doing these things. Um, I haven't shared my whole life. So what's been occurring to me in the last couple of months, I'm totally political and you name it, television, everything, but I've never shared just because there was no one to talk to. But I call it coming out of the closet, as I've come out of the closet, a lot of things that are occurring as though they were bottled up in a storage bin and jammed in my being. And this is why, as much as you think you can do other works, and let this work through you, which I always believed I could, and I think I did. I've realized lately that you have to, if you have this, you have to put it out. You cannot take this information, this wisdom, this knowledge, and not directly put it out in the world. If you're not ready, you're not ready. But in any form, in any way that you can, there comes a point where you're full, and it's either going to completely turn on your being, or you have to put it out.
Yes, that's happening to me with these things that Tyler and John Barnwell came up with, the interview with an exorcist. So as I'm reviewing my life, it's just like, holy cow, I'm like reliving all this stuff and it's coming up. And then right in the process, the spiritual world gives me the next level of insight that, for 70 years, 68 years, I've been trying to figure out. And then it just, boom, it happens. So, but what people always say is, come on now, Joe, tell me exactly, what did you see? Did you see it? Did you hear it? Did you feel it? What was it?
Yeah,
Put it in words that I can understand. Well, you can't. You can't
yeah.
really, just as you said, there's no words that can describe this. All I can say is that Rudolf Steiner says there's 12 senses. And when you have an experience where your etheric body starts to separate from your physical, and you then have a certain type of supersensible perception, that's a mixture of all 12 of your senses. And that is an experience that you can't really relate to someone, because unless they've had that experience, like when I say, oh yeah, I'd look up and I'd see the angels walking by. Oh my engineer friends say, now tell me exactly, what did that look like? Did they have shoes on? Did they have feet? Did you see through them? Was it opaque? Was it transparent? It's no, it's not like that. It's like hearing the creative word. It's like when you get an intuition and something sounds in you and it's not you, but it's kind of you, and it's the creative word sounding through you, and 100% intuitively that it is correct. How do you explain that to somebody?
Yeah,
It sounds like,
and
you got voices in your head.
and then, like a few days ago, when I texted you something that came to in an intuition we'll talk about, which is why we're here. After that, and I'm sure it happened to you. This is amazing. I'm sure it happened to people listening at home or watching, and you've all asked, and you're probably going, yeah, 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 because there's no telling how this living wisdom works within you. There's no merit. You can't get it. If they're going to bring it to you, they're going to bring you the dinner they're going to bring. You're going to get Kentucky Fried Chicken or something tonight, McDonald's, or a 7-course meal from your favorite Italian restaurant. You don't know how spiritual worlds are going to deliver and what. But once you get one, you walk into the restaurant, they call it. And then John Barnwell sent me something that blew me away, because it's something I said last night, which kind of ties into this that we're going to talk about. And it was the Mysteries of Initiation, Rudolf Steiner. It's the fourth lecture. There's 1 through 4. And it was just amazing, and having to do with karma, the things we're going to talk about. So what happens is, as you hook one thing, it's like pulling a fish out or pulling a net in. You think you're getting one, it's just more calm. And Rudolf Steiner would always say things would go too far afield if we continue going sideways on these issues. And politics, we call it, don't get into the weeds, but it's so hard because everything is all one. But you got to stay in that lane, or put the blinders on and just pull it in. You definitely feel like you cheat yourself because you want to just look over there. But if you do, then where was I going? And you lose track of where you're going. And I marvel at Rudolf Steiner, how he was able to give lectures knowing what he knew and staying on subject and just continuing, and how miraculously they work with other lectures, and he catches right back up to another lecture in another reality or a plane. And this is why it's so difficult for some people getting into this right away. But I'm here to tell them it doesn't matter at what level or how many years you do, you're always going to have that same wonder of, oh, let me look over here. Oh, wonder, let me look over there. It will always be with you. You'll never, because it's gazillion years and spiritual beings and happenings that you will never not be overwhelmed if you don't keep your blinders on and recognize, yes, there's a worlds here. They all connect, but I have to today use my ego to gather, reading this dinner today. We're having this food today for a certain purpose in our development. And it's also something that the hierarchies are delivering for a certain reason, way beyond what we think they are.
Absolutely. And you're so right. If you're prepared, then it's like a feast that they're giving you that you didn't really even ask for. It just happened. But if you do it by accident with drugs or strange ritual practices that aren't spiritual, you can have that happen and it will terrify you because you might not be prepared. You might not have tamed your astral body. So instead of seeing the new etheric earth rising as you saw, you might see a dragon coming after you. And I say dragon, not slightly. This is quite serious. When you see one of these, and it's certainly happened to me a few times, where I was scared practically to death. And who was the dragon? The dragon was me. I was just wrestling with my astral body. But literally, sometimes you can see these things. They come right in. But the etheric, when you get a gift of the etheric, it means that you've done some serious work and you're being given the gift of showing you what the supersensible organs can provide for you. And really, what is it? It was them saying, "Hey, you want to have a conversation, Joe?" And if Joe could have pulled over, he could have probably had the conversation. This happened to me one time. I'm driving down the road and I look over and I see this vision, and it was truly a vision. And I went right into the vision. And when I finally turned back, I was off the road headed towards a tree. And I was going to crash into the tree. It was a miracle, whatever pulled me back onto the road. But, so it has to do with timing. It's all about timing. And for
Yeah.
you, probably because you're, just as you said, you are now doing so much work for the spiritual world that the spiritual world just said to you, well, Joe, here's the realm you're in now. You're moving through the etheric realm, the realm of life, the realm of the ethers, and this is what the world looks like. And pretty soon, you're going to be rising up with that ascension process into that etheric world yourself. So we might as well show it to you now, since they love it when you start to do this stuff, because they love to give you gifts like this if you are ready.
Yeah, they are gifts, and people don't realize that. So people, I'm becoming to believe more and more. I wondered all the time, who's into this? For years, I wondered what kind of people are into this, and I'd go to certain places with the Anthroposophical Society, and I just felt shut. I've mentioned this before, just not welcome. It was just a place that didn't seem. Catholic Church was bad enough, and then I go here, and it's like another culty thing. I'm like, I think I'll just stick to my books and not go there. But people, they do know, they don't know where to put it. And that's why when I called you, I'm like, I know where to put it. I'm going to talk to Doug because I'm getting so much out of this. But if I didn't have Doug or John, um, I would have done what I did. But it's so good to be able to share. And really, that's what this is about. All of the circles of people listening here, people that may be listening that have their own circles, this is working more and more. I've been telling this since I started with you. I have a good sense of what's happening in pop culture and what happens in the world, and I can feel there is as we reach this 100-year, this Christmas, the Girthanium was torched 100 years ago, and we're moving into that year of laying the foundation stone, and there are things that are working. And like Rudolf Steiner says, nature takes jumps. She does moves and moves, and all of a sudden you go outside. Ooh, the flower popped. She makes jumps. In the world of the left brain, measure, number, and weight, it's always a linear power at a certain peak performance, and it never fluctuates. It's all this real tight control, where the spirit world in nature, through them, takes jumps and works in totally different rhythms. And there's no telling when a breakthrough or communication will come in. And what I found is it really lines up with my own karma, with my own life. And that's the amazing thing, that these things happen in your daily bread. They're not divorced. And this is the problem with all of this, even all religions. It's like it's divorced from what you're doing, especially when your kid going to school. It's divorced, but this is not divorced. In your daily bread, in your personal karma, all of these things, your spiritual karma, which we're going to talk about if we get to it here. And in our karma doesn't mean bad things. It means development. Maybe you're going to go through this so that in the next cycle, 7 years, you'll develop this. And then in another 7 years, almost like the 9 processes of alchemy, separation, evaporation. It's not linear, and nature makes jumps. So this is why Rudolf Steiner brings anthroposophy. He says that people are going to see the spiritual world. And if we don't put this out, the public's going to be locked up in mental institutions, lobotomies, drugs. And so it's happening right now. And that's why I think we've reached this culmination of drugs and things that are occurring so much with pharmaceuticals and people. And in the foods and the chemicals that we all know about in water, that it's reaching a level now where um, people will either be locked up, or the self-medication or the medication for anxiety and fears and phobias. That's epidemic. And so with spiritual world opening, we're all going to start seeing it. And I think people are going to turn big time towards Rudolf Steiner. There's nowhere else to turn where you can get a scientific answer on just about anything you need to know.
So true. And he said that if you want to develop the supersensible organs to see the etheric, and even further to see into the physical body, to see the shadow of the spirit manifesting there, that you should either do biodynamic agriculture, because that's where the etheric makes itself very clearly presented in plants, or watch a child between age 7 and 14 to see their etheric body grow, or do what you did: study eurythmy and music, because eurythmy is literally a way to make the etheric visible, and it starts to develop your supersensible organs. It's a way that Steiner developed to make visible the true movement of speech in the etheric world and the movement of music. Now, you have had a lot of exposure to eurythmy, so it doesn't surprise me that you can already had inherent in you the ability to see into the etheric with supersensible organs. So do you think your eurythmy training and all you've done might have helped that?
Well, oh, I do, and I have many of these experiences. This one, again, I'll repeat. I only brought it to you because it was so enormous. I guess in size, I saw the whole horizon to horizon rise up in this majestic. While I'm watching it separate another world. The higher world is coming. It's not coming to New Jerusalem and Jupiter. They're not coming the way we think, planetary crashes and volcanoes. It's coming right out, almost like a child leaving this mother's womb. It's coming out alive, slowly but surely. And it takes, over time, it's happening where measure, number, and weight of the materialist scientist won't be able to notice it. It's happening like the glaciers move, even slower, that it's occurring. And to witness it in its size is what grabbed me. But let's jump to the reason that we're having this. And it actually ties in. But I here's the text I sent you. I said, next topic: what is the karma of anthroposophy? How does it adjust its karma when it fails to achieve the karmic goals, in comparison to what a human being would do, the karmic goals? How do anthroposophists and the original anthroposophists and those in the Michael School while Steiner was incarnated after death bring the fruits of anthroposophy to the hierarchies to reorganize, reimagine, and create new deeds towards anthroposophy? In other words, in a nutshell, and when I say karma, I'm not thinking we sinned, therefore we have to come back and pay. That word is so misused. But just the deeds and the cause and the effect and the growth of those who've crossed the other side, come back already, bringing in how it works with Michael and also with these supermen that are bringing the anthroposophy. How are they? Because we do know from one of the lectures I just listened to from John Barnwell that even Christ evolved from the sun to the moon. So even the hierarchies in the spiritual world is moving on. So anyway, the question was all about karma of anthroposophy. Where are we in our karma and our activity right now? You and I, Doug, John, and maybe 100 other people doing this as we bring it out and people listen and hear in a different form than really was just books for 70 years. What is happening with the karma? What's your take on where we are, and how do you see the future of anthroposophy, not the organization?
Wow. Okay. Well, the great questions you always bring. And let's just say that Rudolf Steiner was extraordinarily disappointed with his followers at the end. He wrote sometimes in the last year. He didn't write. He said many things that told the society, "You are failing. You are miserably failing." There's not one single anthroposophist I know that has addressed what he said should be the most exciting thing in anthroposophy, which you just mentioned: the appearance of superhuman beings from the realm of, he calls it Venus, Mercury, and Vulcan. Really, those are the three future incarnations of the Earth. So why is it that his followers, as far as I know, almost none of them except one, Rudolf Grosse, none of them were clairvoyant? they didn't develop clairvoyance. They were trying their hardest. I mean, F. Pfeiffer and Gunther Wachsmuth, these young people, he worked with them nonstop, and they still couldn't get it. And then he found this student named Rudolf Grosse, and he saw him, I think, in the Basel school, the Waldorf school, and he took him under his wing and paid him more attention than anybody. And he didn't tell anybody why. And then when he grew older, he let him come into all of the different sections of anthroposophy. And in those sections, he was basically using his clairvoyance to help advance all of them. And eventually, they made him the head of the Anthroposophical Society. Well, the story is that people were told, yeah, he's clairvoyant, but they won't let you talk to him. His secretary will not let you get in. So I'm going to tell that story at length with John next time we do a talk, because I went there, and having been touched on the shoulder by Christian Rosenkreutz, which actually saved my life as I was on my way to Dornach the first time, when I got there, I was told you have to speak very loudly, and then Rudolf Grosse will come out and tell his secretary to step aside and let this person in. So I did that. Oh no, I really need to speak to Dr. Grosse. And so he came out, brought me in, and we sat there talking about this very thing, the disappointment that a school that is supposed to train you for clairvoyance has no clairvoyance and in the group. And that then the question is, who's going to lead them? Rudolf Steiner was clairvoyant from birth, but he didn't use it the way that a normal psychic would use it. He used it as confirmation to do research in the Akashic realm and then bring it back and make it applicable. And that's the reason out of all science paths, scientific spiritual paths that I know of, the only one that's effective is anthroposophy. But here's the problem. He not only was disappointed with them at the end and said that again and again, that the members had failed him, but he said that in the future, his teachings would be turned towards evil. And you say, well, how is that possible? It's nothing but good. You don't give formulas, you characterize things, you let people come to the experience themselves. How could it possibly go bad? Well, let's just remember, Rudolf Steiner is said to have been the reincarnation of Aristotle. What happened with Aristotle? It turned into modern science. It turned into what we would call the worst form of materialism, where all you have is the 10 categories so that you can then assess everything, analyze it, and put it in the 10 categories. The 10 categories were the rewritten description of the hierarchies of Dionysius the Areopagite, which later became a book that was considered the Holy Grail. And so Aristotle was twisted up and turned into modern, basically, science. And then you have Thomas Aquinas, another incarnation of Steiner's. Aquinas was used to go and kill millions of heretics. They literally quoted Thomas Aquinas, the angelic doctor, as they were killing the Albigensians, as they were killing the Waldensians and the Bogemuls. And millions of people were put to the sword by the Catholic Church based upon Thomas Aquinas's brilliant insight. And so literally, you can't get anyone in the Catholic Church who gave more to describing the experience of the Spirit than him. So Steiner's work comes along. He said that in 100 years, we're all going to experience what he was talking about. So right now, you're experiencing, I'm experiencing, others are experiencing exactly what he described to the T. How many anthroposophists are experiencing it? None. As a matter of fact, I don't know one that is clairvoyant, and the ones that claim to be clairvoyant are actually possessed. It literally, I mean, obsessed and possessed, and they teach insanity. They teach the opposite of Rudolf Steiner, telling you it's anthroposophy. So that's what comes of his good intentions, but it's okay, because he said anthroposophy will be understood as everyone's experience in 100 years, and that's now, as you just pointed out. So he gave, at the very end, he said, okay, maybe you all can't handle what I've given out, which, the 400 books. So I'm going to write a poem, a meditation called the Foundation Stone Meditation. And if you do this with certain rhythms to align yourself with the cosmic forces coming in through your day, through your week, through your the going back and forth between day and night, waking consciousness, sleeping consciousness, dreams. If you actually meditate this thing, which of course, people like myself, we memorized it and said it every single day, multiple times
Human
in a
soul,
day.
you live in the limbs which lead you through.
Absolutely. When you mentioned this yesterday, what was it? 2023 will be the year of the foundation stone. Yeah, exactly. If
Yeah,
people could
it will
get
be the
that.
it will be the year also where I think we're going to continue. I don't want to interject this right here though, but we're moving towards that time where the 100-year rhythm of the burning of the Earthium. Um, just think about what's happening in the society today. An attack on it, a strong attack on the organization is about to occur, bigger than ever. We've seen it incrementally, as you're just addressing, but I think an attack will come. But if anyone didn't know that place could be burnt in 2023 January, um, then you would know that there's an attack right now coming for the society at whole. But it's been coming, and the I think one of the things Rudolf Steiner speaks about is this gift that these supermen from Venus, Vulcan are bringing, Mercury are bringing. If it's rejected, if it's not picked up by men, it will turn into disease, epidemic, earthquakes, volcanoes, destruction, murder, killing. And so, how much of that is occurring because of a rejection of the good, never mind the work of the dark force?
Oh, yes. The first Gurtianum had painted in it and inscribed into the wood the entire evolution, cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis, the evolution of the cosmos, the evolution of human beings. So someone who'd studied his work would have been able to walk in there, look up into these gigantic domes, these cupolas, and see painted on the ceiling this cosmic wisdom. It had to be burnt down. It couldn't exist in our world. That building was built by people from 14 nations during World War I with bombs falling all around them, literally 60 miles away. They, in all directions in Switzerland on the Dornach Hill, the hill that actually William Tell gained the freedom of Switzerland on, it's called Blood Hill. He was there and he had people from all the nations who were at war all working together peacefully. And when he built this, it was of wood. It was the largest wooden dome ever built. Uh, it's actually inexplicable how he was able to do it. He designed it. He was the person in charge of the construction. And basically, it was a peace offering to the world as the world was in war, a world war all around them. And so when it was burnt down, they debate who it was that burned it down. I'm not going to get into that, but I'll say this. People say that when the Goetheanum burnt down, that Rudolf Steiner collapsed his etheric body and it killed him. This is complete and absolute insanity. That's nonsense. That is complete bunk.
Yeah.
No, no, no. That is not the way he died. And then other people will tell you all kinds of crazy stories from then on, because the moment Steiner died, his followers all went in their own personal, instead of I am direction, their me direction. And they became a society of me. And no, you can't be the head of that group. I'm the head of that group. No, we're kicking you out. And they literally kicked out half of the greatest members very shortly after Steiner's death. And then that caused such a rift that it took a long, 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 long time for them to heal and actually apologize to each other. And then other rifts have happened since then. And right now, as far as I can tell, the karma of the Anthroposophical Society has led them to, what do you call it? En passant. They can't go any forward. They're in a cul-de-sac. They are being attacked from all directions. And my dear friends, I used to know every single Vorstein member. And when I went there with Herr Grosse, knowing that I was clairvoyant, said, "Hey, would you mind working with the different sections while you're here?" So I met Bakamul, I met Weissman, I met all these, Hebel, I met uh, Hagen Bassan, all of them. And I would go there and listen to what they were doing. And they couldn't understand, because you got to be a member to join that section. You have to know the secret meditation. You have to blah, blah, blah. Well, I got to sneak in and I tried to help them a little bit here or there, giving them whatever insight the spirit gave me. Well, those people are all gone. Those people have been attacked from left and right, up and down, forward and backward. They have not survived. And right now, unfortunately, the last person I knew that was truly, truly, truly a follower of Rudolf Steiner and lived it is no longer a Vorstand member. And as I say, I've known all of them except the new ones. And the new ones, oh no, no, these are controversial people. They might as well be elected by people who are anti-anthroposophists. And so right now, because of the psychic down the hill who claims that she's greater than Rudolf Steiner because she has stigmata and inedia, she doesn't eat, which are both big fat lies, or because of people who say that they have clairvoyant insight into the elemental world, and then they're telling people all over the world that they're possessed and that this one person is the only person that can help them not be possessed. This is the opposite of anthroposophy. This is the deprecation of anthroposophy. So when you talk about the karma, we shouldn't be afraid of the fact that the Comte de Saint Germain had 10 incarnations as a martyr, where he was crucified, where he was given the worst tortures that a human being could possibly give. Why would that be? He's this highly developed spiritual person. Why would he have to have 10 martyr incarnations? Because suffering is what gives birth to spiritual insight. But conscious suffering, what Steiner calls intellectual clairvoyance, not pseudo psychic
Right.
hoo-ha. And so that's what we're seeing now is the karma of the Anthroposophic Society. They just sent out a notice today that they're going to now vote for the new leader of anthroposophy in the Anthroposophical Society in America. And as Tyler just pointed out to me, they give you like one day or not even a day to put in your suggestion of a name. In other words, they've already chosen who it's going to be, and it will not be anyone who has written a book on anthroposophy, who can give a lecture on anthroposophy, who can tell you the history of anthroposophy. No, they choose the worst people they can. Why? Because Steiner pointed out that in this age, it would be the people who failed their Egyptian incarnation that would come back and take over running the society. They didn't get through the outer gate. There's 3 courts. They got to the outer court and they saw the art. And so they think Waldorf's nice because they sing songs and do pictures. And oh, isn't anthroposophy lovely because of the pretty colors and the pictures and because of the nice food?
I saw that with, I believe it's Steiner Books. I still get the email, and I spoke to the lady that took over um, to become the executive director of it. And every Sunday, I get a nice little email with a little poem, which has nothing to do with anything. And we had a long conversation. A nice woman. She came over from McGraw Hill Books, but someone's totally doesn't know a thing. And I hate to say doesn't know a thing, isn't from that world. And so you're going to get nice poems and fundraising emails, and can't we all get along like the United Nations? And it's the spirit of what it should be is being held captive. But I believe, and so I think we're doing what we're doing. I believe the karma, and that's before I closed my question, I said the karma of anthroposophy, not the society. But I'm glad you did the society because we know what's happening there. But that is not necessarily the karma of anthroposophy, the spiritual being, and all of us who are becoming midwives randomly on the outside, almost like when the Old Testament God, the Jews wouldn't take it, so God has the parable where he opens up the dinner to the Gentiles. And I think that this only way it could spread out would be for the inner core to fail, the nucleus to fail, and then I call it valence electrons, which we are. We're valence electrons. We're spinning off, and we're I think it's going to truly be non-denominational, non-culty, but that gets to my question with what we understand about an organization and its legal and spiritual attachments to the spiritual anthroposophia. Talk about that for a minute, what you may think, guess at it, who cares? Just say, I'm guessing at this if you can't come up with it. With what I feel, and I felt since I've gotten involved to go public with this, is that something, I see this in politics. We do this. We go on the outside of the party. They call us malcontents. They call us extreme, whatever. No matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, you're the fringe. And I think the fringe is going to take it forward. What the core Vorstand would call the fringe is going to move this forward, and it's going to be stripped, and the organization will go through I won't call it physical assault, but an assault.
Totally. Peter Sells, who was Sergei Prokofiev's best friend at the end of his life, They did books together. And the last time that Sergei spoke in the Great Hall in Sel's book, he describes the fact that Sergei was saying, "It's dead. This is a tomb of the unknown soldier. I go into the bookstore and there are more books against Rudolf Steiner than there are Steiner books himself. Everyone writing about Steiner is there, and all the people who attack him ruthlessly, who literally those books were forbidden in their library. Oh no, they're the prominent books now." And then he pointed this out. He said, "You can walk through this entire Goetheanum, you can walk around Dornach, and you will not even know who Rudolf Steiner is. You will not see his name. You will not see anyone talking about him. But if you go into the back hall of the Goetheanum, which is literally a back stairway that nobody uses, you will find the picture Rudolf Steiner said never, ever to hang in public. He allowed someone to photograph him while he was in direct intellectual clairvoyant contact with the hierarchy. And the picture is awesome. When you stand there and look at it, he's coming off that page and he's looking right through you. It's just amazing. They've hung it in the back stairwell so no one will even see it. And then when you talk about the what's called the group or the statue, this 20, I think it's 27-foot tall statue of Christ with holding back the forces of Lucifer and Ahriman with the spirit of humor up in the corner, he gives what's called the Isis myth, the new Isis myth. And what he says is that the new Seth is going to come to Dornach, going to look underneath the statue, and we'll find the fact that anthroposophy has been schlepped around the world until there are 14 sections in pieces of anthroposophy.
Osiris.
Osiris, exactly. And he basically says that essentially that anthroposophy will be broken into its component parts and that they won't even be connected to one another. And that's true. These sections don't even work together anymore. The heads of the section have not demonstrated themselves to be carrying on Rudolf Steiner's work. And so we created Neo-anthroposophy. Now, Neo-anthroposophy is basically being a Steinerite, not being an anthroposophical societyite. Okay? No, we don't want that. We want Steiner. We want Steiner in his pure form. So right now, in Europe, they have decided that Steiner is a fascist and that he's a racist. And they go back and they take quotes from his old theosophical days when he's referring to the races. Those aren't even the races we have now. Okay,
Right.
these are the races that came off of Atlantis, which technically really don't even exist anymore. And then they will say, they quoted 140 times that he said racist or anti-Semitic. Anything that is against any race is, of course, anti-Semitic, according to these people. So what did Dornach allow them to do? Allow the accusers to come in, use the Great Hall, go over all the points, read them nice and slow. The hall was filled with people, and then not a single anthroposophist defended Steiner.
Yeah.
This is where we're at.
Spiritual reparations.
It's so sad.
They knuckled under to all that. Well, it goes on. The truth goes on in any form. So I think it will continue on, like I'll say it almost like what the Gentile picked it up because it was rejected. What the supermen are bringing from these planets, if it's rejected, it's going to go where it's going to go. And so that's the karma I was asking about. How do you see, or what can you imagine? Because we're in the midst of it, and what we do to do things like this and more are actually creating and working the karma event, not the group, but the anthroposophy. You've been doing it anyway, but take a peek at and take a poke at what you think is really occurring with the power structure, because that's, I'd have to call it power. It's power. If it has a power, once it's rejected to destroy the earth, it's got some superpower if it's benevolent.
Well, in the Foundation Stone meditation, he doesn't mention the word anthroposophia, but in the laying of the first foundation stone and in the second foundation stone, the first one was underneath the first Kirtianum, the second one was this poem, this mantra. He says, we must awaken anthroposophia. So the question was, when I met Sergei Prokofiev, he, as all anthroposophists would do, highfalutin anthroposophists, they'd tell you this and tell you that, and then they go, but the real secret is to understand anthroposophia. And then you can't find a single book on it. You can't find a single anthroposophist speaking about it.
Yeah.
The Riddles of Philosophy was Steiner's evolution of philosophy. very clearly, he spells out the incarnation of the being Anthroposophia, or Holy Sophia. And what does she do? She stands at our side at all times, ready to give us wisdom. That's the future. We don't need Rudolf Steiner anymore to give us the revelations. But if you had the time before now to study Steiner, like you and I have, and John and others, then it went into us and it developed a conscience. So as we look out on the world, we have a conscience. And a conscience will not let you get away with doing nothing like the Anthroposophical Society does. They even tell people to go get things that will kill you, if you know what I'm
And
talking
then
about.
there's the sheath, her sheath, the human beings and her time rhythms of, I won't get to it, but Sergei, I have his books on this, how many years, and through Rudolf Steiner also, that the sheaths of Anthroposophia and how she's working as a human being in a different time way where we become her garments. So what we're doing in a way, I don't know how to articulate this for the listeners out there because this stuff is pretty heavy. Um, the the society itself was almost like an abortion, and it survived, and we've picked it up and kept it alive.
I would say that's absolutely true. Yes, and
Horrible to
so
say it like that, but think about an attempted abortion or a botched delivery, however you want to call it, um, but maybe not even ill intent, just willful possessed intent by society members being infiltrated by, I call it the Dark Lord. like Star Wars, the Dark Lord infiltrated that place. And I've been there a couple of times and I felt it. You could cut it with a machete. The dark forces you can cut. If you walk around there and you're not a member, I could just walk around. I could cut the atmosphere with the dark forces that were there, not from what was created, but what's inhabited. I feel that same dark force in the Catholic Church. I go to my little churches that I go to, the St. Thomas Seminary here in Bloomfield, Connecticut, where all the old priests live, and they do a little mass at 12 o'clock because I love to go to mass and I kind of hang out with the old priests once in a while. But when I walk into full church on a Sunday, not to knock Catholicism because I'm Catholic, but holy smokes, there's a cloak over everything. And I felt that at Girthianum when I was there in the 80s, two different times.
the cult of personality oozes out of every blade of grass in Dornoch and out of the Goetheanum. And those people believe Steiner by faith, which he told them never, ever, ever, ever to do. Faith isn't where it's at now. We have crossed the threshold since the early 1900s. We can now experience Christ in the etheric. Well, he said, go do it. And who's going to help you? He said, what we need now is not the influence of faith in Christ. We need the wisdom of Christ, the Sophia of Christ. So he literally said, we need Sophia Christos. And that's the reason that Tyler wrote her books on that subject.
With the wisdom, next comes the vision.
And that's the point. If you don't have the results, then you're not doing it right. If you can't contact the being of wisdom now through your conscience, then you might become an anthroposophist who, by faith, believes in the Archangel Michael and then wants to make the distinction that he's actually an archai now, as if you would know that, folks. If you knew the Archangel Michael, then you would know that you'll never get there by faith. It is by rising up to the cosmic wisdom that Michael is holding above the earth in that realm that you literally experienced and saw. In that etheric realm is the wisdom of Sophia, and her son is the Archangel Michael, who is now risen to be the time spirit for, and will stay there as an archai. And so you have a cult of the personality based upon faith, which Steiner railed against both of those. And they think that because they can say, oh, well, Michael, oh, Michael, and then do the sigil for Michael. Oh, isn't this marvelous? They think they're having an experience. That's not an experience. Do you see the etheric world rising up before you? Do you see your etheric body, once you've tamed your astral, separating from your physical and giving you basically infinite spiritual powers? Anxious, as Steiner said, the ever-present spiritual world is there to help you. They want to help you. And if you aren't asking for it, and if you're not getting it, then you sure didn't get Steiner's teachings. And that's, I make a clear distinction between anthroposophy and Steiner's teachings.
Right, right. And also the fact that, and this is a fact, and someone said to me the other night, it was astounded me. Actually called John Barnwell and said, John, you won't believe what happened to me. I'm talking about some of this to a stranger, someone who doesn't know, and I'd never do that. And the first thing they said is, prove it. Who said that? By what authority? Really? Well, who said that? But there is no authority that will tell you with this. This is the whole key. By what authority? Pontius Pilate, by what authority is your kingdom? Not of this world, but a spiritual fact is, whether you believe it, understand it, or want to know about it, is that we will begin to look like a different race of men in our future incarnations because of this. And you can see that in the timeline we live in now. People that are into drugs or into really bad habits or crime, or you can see on them they have this nature, this criminal nature. I don't care what the, call it a sin. I don't care what the habit is or whatever it is. If it's not helpful and if it's not benevolent and helping and bringing life, and if it's just ego and self-centeredness, it's more retarded, and you can see that on people that are maybe going through something because of their own personal karma. Again, not to judge you, because who knows, like Mary Magdalene, what someone has to go through, but to look at it and understand they're trapped in a sphere, in a world, and it's their character of their being. Even if, no matter what their race, no matter what their gender, you could see something on them. It shows you that our activity and the thoughts on us are, we're becoming that in this Maya. And we will in the future look more like our own race of people. All those, whether it's anthroposophy or people with a great heart that are seeking to do good things and be helpful, doesn't need that label. And I think that's what bothers me about anthroposophy, the group, the organization is, and I felt it since I was like 17 years old. I'm not one of them. They're telling me I'm not one of them. And I reject that. It's like the unions. I'm not one in the union. I've been in the union when I was younger, and everybody else is out. Why are they out? Why are you exclusive? You feel that, you see that with many different groups in the world, and they're not inclusive. And so to me, that's what happened. The society became exclusive more and more and more. And I've only experienced it since the early 70s. And I wasn't inside to see what you felt. God bless you for going inside there. But I think the neo-anthroposophy you're doing with that, well, I'll call it a label, a movement, that's what's going to happen collectively the next couple of years. And we're going to see the falling apart of the society. And maybe not for reasons that we understand today, but it cannot generate. And like the Catholic Church, like our Constitution of the United States, like all the things that were made to be good and holy, they're falling down now. That doesn't mean they're over. That doesn't mean the movement and the spiritual beings behind them. I think the spiritual beings, all of them, are looking for everyday people to pick this up without, the card, the pink card that you belong to the society and you're a member, and that makes you some kind of like the body of Christ transformation, transubstantiation. That pink card makes you an anthroposophist, right? Right? If anybody out there listening know what I'm saying, you get a pink card, so that's a transubstantiation of the host into the body of Christ. That's what that culty thing is, and you see it everywhere in this country, in this world.
Absolutely. Let's take the Catholic Church, which I was deeply involved in, and okay, Thomas Aquinas saw angels. He levitated when he said Mass. He would levitate so much that he had to be ordered not to say Mass anymore because his assistant, Reginald Pepperno, would have to come and grab him by his feet and pull him back down to the earth while he was saying Mass, okay? He saw angels. That's why they called him the Doctor of Angels, the angelic doctor. Well, how many people have I met in the Catholic Church, and I've met a lot, and I'm clairvoyant, and I can know a clairvoyant instantaneously. They don't have to open their mouth. How many people have I met who's a priest in the Catholic Church that has witnessed an angel? Zero. Anyone can basically get into the society, but you have to go through a rigor, being questioned and interrogated to get into the first class. So you get into the first class, and what does it tell you? It tells you how to encounter the hierarchy directly in yourself, not in some theoretical faith-believing or in some kind of doctrine or dogma. No, it's absolutely clear. He wanted them to encounter and directly encounter angels, archangels, archai, and the other hierarchy in themselves. So he gave out the foundation stone meditation, and it basically teaches you in that mantra what the hierarchy is, how they manifest in your life, and how you basically attain the experience of Christ in the etheric. Okay, how many anthroposophists have I met that actually use the first class or use the foundation stone and can literally tell you that they know how the hierarchy permeates you? There's been a few people who are dead who wrote a few books, but in terms of living people that might lead the society now, zero, not a one. So, how is it that you get the opposite from all the efforts of a saint like Rudolf Steiner, that his followers then become a cult of the personality who believe in faith, but then basically turn, for instance, on Facebook, how many people are going to post Steiner quotes and then never state what their relationship to it is? A Steiner quote is not going to help anybody, folks, okay? Especially if you haven't read the whole book and if you didn't do the development that you would need to understand that quote. And why won't people then say, this was important to me because then I went outside and I saw the living earth rising up from the earth? No, you're not going to find that because it's now turned into a Steiner said society. And
Because
people who,
I believe it's fear driven. They don't want to go any deeper than have the surface. You know, you buy something, Louis Vuitton bag, and you wear that, you think you're what? Because you have Louis Vuitton bag, or whatever the brand is that you're going to buy for clothing, and they are in it for that reason, and they feel they'll maybe catch up and do more later. It's a surface way of feeling connected to something, almost like a stereotype, something that you're adding to yourself spiritually, whether it was yoga or Steiner or whatever it happens to be, without the deep. And you can't make anyone do it deep, but what happens is that they open the door and they close it. And again, this whole pool of people looking to pretend to seek and then get either become, again, I don't know other people how they read Steiner, but when I was young and as a teenager, I woke up when I read it. It didn't put me to sleep. And so many people I've talked to that I've shared books with or whatnot, the minute that they pick it up, they can't do a page and they're out cold. And which leads to the fact that they may have an endearment towards it, but they can't stay awake, almost like Gethsemane with Jesus. Will none of you stay awake with me? The spirit is too strong for their being to be able to, or their interests aren't there. And I always use that word interest. Why am I interested and other people are not interested in this? How could you not be interested in this? Nothing else matters. We're in a sphere. If this was a sci-fi movie, we got parachuted in and whoa, where am I? What is this? I want to know. Don't you want to know? Not to get out of here, but what is this? Who put this here? And that interest doesn't, it's not a, what's the word? Important. It's not something that's curious. And I don't mean curiosity. I mean true interest, where you've got to keep going. You've got to know. You've got to search and keep searching. Parsifal, search for the Holy Grail. You have to, you want to. You're just driven out of something you don't know what, and you don't know why other people are not. And really, I guess that's the heart of the karma of anthroposophy and the Anthroposophical Society. It's Parsifal. It's, do you have the courage? Do you have the fortitude to quest, to do the quest? And for those who are, no matter what their brand or whatever group they're part of, or pink card or blue card, it doesn't matter. And I think that's where anthroposophy for the second, we're in a transition for the second 100 years, because these recordings will be out there in 100 years.
well, you hit the bullseye again. Really, it's your own effort, it's your own moral development. It doesn't matter whether you study Steiner. Did you develop yourself morally? Do you love people? Do you love yourself? Do you know where you came from, where you are, where you're going? Because if you don't, you are simply a hypocrite who is faking it, hoping you'll make it. And you're not going to make it by believing in Rudolf Steiner. His work is too hard, as you pointed out. You have to engage your mind, your heart, your soul, your spirit in it before you can actually get anything out of it. And I'm going to say this very clearly. The Catholic Church and all churches are filled with a bunch of hypocrites because they preach that they're going to contact the spirit, but then only the priest in a girl's dress can help you get there. Okay. That's complete nonsense. That priest is probably more immoral than you are if you look closely. The deal is moral development. It is the grail, the gradual path, and you're supposed to become the grail king and marry the maidens of the grail, marry one of the maidens of the grail, so that you do what? So you put your own blood on the line, just like Jesus did. If you don't put your own blood on the line, you're not going to get anything out of
And what is
anthroposophy.
your blood?
It's your
Your
ego.
your ego. You got to put your ego on the line and not become egoism. Taking it off the line turns it into egoism.
Joe, once again, your topics are marvelous. I'm so glad that you're willing to share your experiences with people because some people would call us crazy, but that's okay
That's
because
okay.
no problem. When you have the experience, you will be calling us to say, "Oh my heavens, you were right. This is really true."
Yeah.
So what we're preaching here is very simple. You yourself, your I am, can contact Christ. If you need help, ask for Sophia's help. She's the being of wisdom, and she will teach you about the cosmic Christ, not some cult of the personality, Jesus of Nazareth thing. No, we're talking about direct interaction with the spiritual world in direct communication using the language of the spirit. And so, once again, when you point out the question of karma, the Anthroposophical Society, it turns out to be the opposite of what most anthroposophists would think. And that's the reality that Steiner told us about. And if you read his work, you'll find it there. So, Joe, this seemed like it was 2 minutes long. We're going to have to continue. I think you have two other wonderful framed ideas that we're going to discuss after this. That was just the first one. So, like our subscribers will tell us, this is meaning so much to them because both of us are being honest and coming out and sharing our inner life with people.
Yeah. And we're
Normally,
not
you'll get
and,
shot down.
and we're not, if for those listening and for you, maybe you with all your friends at home or at work, we are not prepared. We come up with a very simple little question and then we let it fly. We let the spirit lead us. And then Doug and I can both feel, and I'm sure you can listening at home or wherever, that this spirit is leading into the works of anthroposophy, of Rudolf Steiner, of God, really without the encumbrances and the dogma and the self-centered, egotistical groups that are out there. You can be truly free, like in the 6 days they wanted us before drugs to be free and full of love. You actually can.